Okay, I think we can start. It's time. So I'll just improve that. Is it okay audio-wise? They're in the back. Is it okay? Can you hear me? Okay. I will try to be a bit closer. I can see my notes now, but yeah, we'll figure out. Okay, the title of the session now is Modular Software and Modular Infrastructure. And the subtitle is Let's Build Base Docker Images Together. And I find both either, even though that I created that, the title and subtitle, I find them both a bit misleading in terms of what I have to say today. But it's not going to be that far from the topic, so relax. If you came for that, I will deliver, I hope. My name is Jakub Piasecki. I'm from Poland. I will tell a little bit more about myself in a minute, but I would like to start with big thanks to the sponsors, and I think like everyone thanks all the sponsors, but everyone like goes through the diamond, platinum sponsor and stop on the gold sponsor. So I would like to stop for a moment on the diamond sponsor, Acquia, and then the platinum sponsors, which are Wunder Group, Platform SH, and Javali, and also the gold sponsors, Commerce Guys, 1x Internet, Bloom Idea, Everest, Nouveau, Thunder, and Amazing Labs. Thanks all. Without you, we couldn't be here. So now, who am I? My Twitter and all the handles you can find on the internet is this. Zaporylia. I'm the CTO at a Link Factory. That's a Danish-based company also with an office in Poland. I'm Polish, but I work from the Copenhagen office. And since recently, since few months ago, I'm the CTO of the Drupal department at that company. I'm also Drupal Docker lead. I will tell a little bit more about it in a few minutes. And I've been at that role for last 3 years, over last 3 years. And I've been around Drupal for over 7 years. So my background is being a Drupal developer rather than DevOps or sysadmin. I must ask you, how many of you are sysops in your company? Okay, there's one. And DevOps? And the same one. And developers, rest of you? Yeah, I hope. That's good, because I'm with my developer background, I feel much comfortable being among people like me. But this session will be a little bit a DevOps session, so don't be intimidated by that. As I am not, even though I'm giving this session. So what this session is about, I would like to start highlighting what is this going to be about. And it's going to be about infrastructure as a code. I will explain that in a moment. Then the modularity of the infrastructure, about some best practices that I would like to highlight. And I hope there is going to be a room of some brainstorming together with you. Also, I must tell what this session is not about, because it's also very important that you have very high expectations from me and I'm not delivering. So this is what I'm not going to cover. And I'm not going to give you any simple recipes about how to run, especially how to run Docker on production. This is not going to be about that. There's many people asking this question: do you run on production? Do you run on production? And this is not going to be about it. Sorry. So back to the title for a moment. The title was Modular Software, Modular Infrastructure. And I will cover two subjects, general subjects, the application part and the infrastructure part. And what I mean by these words, by application, I mean that some project, preferably Drupal project, that you want to or that you are running. And the infrastructure is going to be the environment in which this project is running. So we could probably find better terms. I'm not a native English speaker, so this is what I came up with. So the infrastructure is not going to be like the physical stuff, the bare metal machines. It's going to be a little bit about the virtualization, and but generally it's going to be about this environment we use to run our Drupal sites, and the application is going to be this Drupal site. So I have a quite bold statement to make in the beginning of the session, which is this: application heavily depends on the infrastructure. Do you agree with that statement? Do you think that the application depends on the infrastructure? Can you find some elements of this infrastructure that are, without them, you couldn't really run your application? I hope so. I don't see any hands or anything, but I hope you find it that way, and I do find it that way. I believe that the applications heavily depends on the infrastructure, and I must put the stress on the heavily word, because without the infrastructure and without the right infrastructure, we couldn't run our applications. So that's the second part of this sentence. We must commit our infrastructure to the code base of the project, of the application. Because the requirements of the applications in the infrastructure can change over time, we must be able to run our application on the infrastructure at any point of the application lifetime. Does it mean that infrastructure is the code? And moreover, does it have to apply to some coding principles we have as coders? I'm happy that most of us are the coders, not the sysops. So I hope that we are on the same page. But if not, what I think about it, the infrastructure as a code, is that since we are committing our things to the code base of the project, we should treat it the same way as we do with our PHP, for instance, code, our Drupal modules, custom Drupal modules, our themes, our code, of which the application is built upon. So, in my opinion, like, answering this is not a question, but having this in mind, my answer is yes, yes, yes. We should think about the infrastructure as about code, and it must follow basic coding principles. Of course, you could, let's say, hack your way in, and you could think about infrastructure as about the .iso file. So you could just compile your virtual machine on which you are running your application into the ISO file, and then just commit this ISO file along with your code base. And every time you change something, let's say that you add another PHP extension, you can just commit this ISO file again. But first of all, it's usually a heavy file. And second of all, why not to go one step further, and why not to compile your application, the code base of your application, into the same ISO file and just ship ISO file? And every time you make a change, to commit just the ISO file and nothing else. You just compile everything in the ISO file and just, you can ship it. You can do a lot of interesting stuff about the application, but it's very hard to maintain it this way, right? Because especially if you're working on a team and there's more people than just us working on the same application in different scopes of the application, like on the different module. There are going to be some problems with like pushing changes just based on the one ISO file, of course. So it's better to keep your infrastructure in some sort of human readable version, some human readable format. And by that, I mean the code. There are already different formats, right? There are Vagrant files, which are human readable. These are just plain text files. And yeah, there are some recipes how to provision your infrastructure for the project. There is Ansible, of course. There is Docker. There is more than that. I'm not gonna cover all of these, and in fact, I'm gonna stick to just one of these technologies. And since we are developers and we love like the new hipster stuff, let's go hipster. This is the picture I took this morning on the way to the venue, and I think it covers what I'm going to talk about a little bit more. So yeah, let's choose Docker. That's Docker, yeah. That's Docker Whale, and I'm sure that you are like, oh, yet another guy talking about Docker. That's a bit boring, and you probably heard all of this before. And but I would like to take another approach on the talk about Docker. I don't want to just talk about basics of the Docker, but I want to look at it as it is a code. Because I strongly believe, and that's just my opinion, but you can agree or disagree, but I believe that Docker can be a code, can be considered this way. So how many of you are not familiar with this format of writing the Docker file? Docker file is the way how we compose or how we manage our Docker environment. And are you familiar or not? You can say ooh, or raise a hand, or give me thumbs up or whatever. Just some reaction from you. I need it. So that's a Docker file. That's example Docker file. And for me personally, it looks like code. I don't know if you agree. You agree, okay. At least some waves. That's good. So what we can see here, I don't have a pointer, but the board is very close, so I will do that. These are instructions. We have from instruction, maintainer instruction, run instruction, and copy instruction. These are instructions, and Docker names it instruction. That's why I'm using this word. And then under each instruction, there are some. There is some text. Let's call it random text for now. There's something happening, but as I see it, since it's even named instruction, it means that it's doing something, right? It instructs. In this specific example, it's a Docker build command, how to build something. So in this way, I believe this is a code. But since it's a code, does it follow some basic design principles? And yeah, I hope that we can let's find out this together. And oh, I have a subtitle to this slide. Is Docker a programming, or in this term, in this example, infrastructure programming language? That's a thesis, and we will try to defend it. Are you familiar with this, dry? Who is familiar with dry? Okay, so dry means do not repeat yourself. This is the same dry you've been thinking about? Again? Yeah, less hands, but yes, still on the same page. I'm happy about that. So dry is one of the coding principle which says that we should not repeat ourselves, or we must not repeat ourselves. So let's look at Dockerfile again and see if we follow this principle. Do you think, and now this is the brainstorming part, do you think, and by do you think, I mean how Dockerfile can follow the dry principle? This is an open question, and I would like to have some answers now. Are there any answers? Again, the principle is do not repeat yourself. We've reduced many lines. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not trying to guess how it's not compatible with this rule, but how it is. So please be open to that as well. So how I find it, that it follows the dry principle, is that it reuses some images by inheriting them. So let's go back. Oh, I went back way too far. So the first instruction here is from something, and then it does something. So the from instruction tells us that you should not do the same things again, the same things that are defined in the PHP 7.0 FPM Alpine image, but you should just take it and run a little bit on top of it. So that's how I find Dockerfile following or being considered as a compatible with the dry principle. What else? There is add copy instructions, which just takes some file and apply it to our Docker image. And you can reuse the same file and just copy it to many images. So this is also something which can be considered as a dry component. And there are repositories. So these images which are built based on Dockerfile can be pushed somewhere and pulled by someone else, so that someone else doesn't have to write it again. You can just pull it and use it. And this is how I think the dry is compatible with the dry principle. There are probably more than just 2 examples, but let's leave it for now and go to the next one. The KISS principle. Ruben wants to kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. That's the explanation of the acronym. So can we do the same thing again? Why this is simple, stupid? Anyone wants to have a take on it? Does it look complex? Yeah, there's a hand. I failed a little bit to hear what you just said, but
no, it doesn't work. I just meant in Linux distributions we use packages to declare dependencies.
Yep.
So you can also just use a package, create a package, and then declare dependencies with this, and then would keep it really simple without adding a bunch of package and installing them manually.
Yeah, sure. And probably most of them are packages already. There are some dependencies on Xdebug. There are some dependencies on different things, right? So how I find it? It's very simple, in my opinion, stupid simple, because it's just 7 lines of code, which allows you to run the infrastructure, of which only 4 lines are instructions. Yeah, so only 4 of them are instructions, and only 3 are just like effective instructions, which does something, and because the maintainer is just the metadata. It's super easy to read it and write it. So in my opinion, it's case compatible. Next one. Oh. You ain't gonna need it. So here we have some basic PHP FPM Docker file, or Docker file which will build PHP FPM image. So to answer the question about the compatibility with this principle, I would say that what it's not there, and what it's not there, there are only instructions that are absolutely required to run this particular service, or this particular the container based on the image, and only these instructions or this code has been added to the Docker file. And let's keep in mind that the principle says that you ain't gonna need it. You ain't gonna need the cache for the APK, right? You ain't gonna need it. And the PHP extensions are only limited to that, to those required by the core, or it depends on your use case. Some most popular distributions. So we will put only these things. This is the example. So that's why I'm mentioning the core and the Drupal core. I mean, and some distributions, because you can see that among Docker, among PHP extensions, you have SOAP, which is not required. So I think this SOAP extensions a bit violates the rule. And BCMat is there. It's not required by core, but it's required by Drupal Commerce, which is a very popular distribution, right? So that's why it was added there. And also, like the PDO, MySQL, and PDO, PostgreSQL, you probably don't need them both. So this is also a violation. But in the same time, maybe it's better to keep them together, because then you can easily swap from one SQL driver to another one. I don't know. I think we must be pragmatic about everything, and we can't just blindly follow rules. The rules are there to override them, right? But to keep them in mind. Yep. I think that this is a hardcore stuff. The solid. You know the mnemonic solid, right? Single responsibility principle, open close principle, risk of substitution principle, interface segregation principle, and dependency inversion principle. This is kind of the most popular thing that people have to keep in mind when creating applications in any application or in any programming language, including PHP. So, is this Docker file compatible with Solid? Yeah, I just asked myself this question, and no, let's stop this madness and stop getting through Docker file, and probably we are getting too far a little bit. But are we really? Oh. When you will look at it, it's funny enough that it, in my opinion at least, it is compatible with the single responsibility, because we have only this image is limited to the FPM, to running the PHP FPM and nothing else. There is no command line, there is no command line tools, there is no Apache server or Nginx or MySQL or anything. It's limited to just have this one single responsibility, to run PHP FPM and nothing else. In my opinion, it's also compatible with open close principle, because once we compile this, it's closed for the modification, but it's still open for extension. So we can take this and we can extend it by writing our own Docker file on top of that one. Of course, there are some tricks people do, and people put a lot of logic into environmental variables, which allow them to modify their containers on the runtime. And I think this, that way we can violate OCP, so open close principle. And we must be very careful about it. Of course, we will still use environmental variable for different stuff, but we must be very careful that we don't overdo it, as it can be done, of course. So Liskov substitution principle, this one, sounds fancy. But again, I believe this Docker file follows this rule. Because one instruction in this file is independent from the other ones. So everything what happens, like if I cd into the folder in one instruction, and then I add another run instruction below, and I will try to do something on the files, I'm going to be in different folder. So the layers are independent from each other, and therefore, in my opinion, this code or the Docker file can be compatible with the LSP principle. And the last one, dependency inversion principle. Since we proved, or I tried to prove that it's compatible with the single responsibility principle, I believe it's also compatible with the last one, with the dependency inversion principle, because if we take this image as a one service and then put another service just for Nginx, and then yet another service just for MySQL, and we can swap them if we want. We can replace the MySQL with another MySQL. We can replace Nginx with another Nginx. This is basically dependency injection we do through the Docker YAML files, Docker compose YAML file. Yeah. Let's stop this madness and stop going through all of this. What I think is that the question, so can we think of infrastructure as of code? And my answer is yes. And I try to prove it through going through these files and applying the same principles we use for programming languages on Docker file, which is basically the infrastructure for our project. It could be the same for Ansible roles. It could be the same for Vagrant files. But in this presentation, I'm covering the Docker part. So, should we start thinking about it as about code? And definitely, we should. And we should do it starting now, or you probably already started doing it. And I'm very happy about it. So, here's the list of best practices. Some of them are directly copied from docker.com. Run single process per container, or try to run single process per container. Decouple your infrastructure, so do not put more than one services into one container. One container should run only one service, right? And then you decouple it, you put it together into group of services, and then you orchestrate these services together through some Docker Compose file or Kubernetes or whatever is your poison. Don't install unnecessary packages. We already said that this is the, keep it stupid simple. Just also think about the image size. Do share the parent images, so you minimize the overall size of your application. If every of the services, of the images, share the same from infrastructure, from base image, like Ubuntu in specific version, or Alpine, then we don't reserve the same, like the space on our disk for where we are running this infrastructure over and over. We just do it once because different images can share some layers. Remember to clear the cache, because we must think about the place where we run our application, and we try to keep everything as simple and as clean as possible. Also think about layers, because as I said, images can share the same layers. If we build from top to the bottom, the top layers are can be shared across all the like the base image, for instance, the Alpine 3.6 can be shared across all the services. Then you have some PHP services, one for CLI, for instance, and another one for FPM. They can also share some resources. And so think about layers, and the layers are based on the instructions I just showed. I will go back for a moment. Okay. So let's go to the next chapter and ask ourselves the question: how Docker can be used for Drupal applications. So one of my colleagues, Alex, I don't think Alex is here, called it the Docker Plus, and that trademark is for him because I don't know, he invented it probably, and the term describes some wrappers over Docker to easy out the way how we run our applications. And there are many tools like that. There's Lando, there is ddev, there is Doxal, there is a very new one called Docker-dev, Drupal-dev.io. There's probably more of them. There's shitload of them to be honest. But the problem is there are some problems, of course, and one of the main problems is they are all having some assumptions. And the assumption is that, I don't know, let's say that I'm Lando maintainer. I want to take over port 80 on your machine, on your host machine. And now I'm switching role, and I am the dev maintainer, and I also want to port 80. And we have conflict. And this is a conflict I stumble upon many times, that especially some freelance developers who are talked to using one or another have a problem when they start working on the second, third, fourth project, because they are, like the companies they are working for, are using different tools, different Docker Plus platforms. Because Lando, to make it easy for you, it wants port 80. ddev, same. Doxal, the same. So to run two applications at the same time, you have to kill one and open another one. And it's always like that. And it's, people are sometimes tired about. So maybe we should look a little bit deeper and try to think how we can build our perfect instead of using something already used by others. And there are some good examples on the internet and some resources that allows you to reuse, or that make you easy to kind of Dockerize your application in your own, very own way. And one of them is Docker for Drupal. And it's provided by the Woodby. Woodby is a company, I think they are from China. What I like and what I dislike about it is that I believe there is a very good separation between different services. They created huge base of different base images, or parent images, how we should name them. And the adoption of this stack is amazing. It's hundreds of stars on GitHub. Yeah. You know that you measure the coolness of the project by the stars, right? So it's very cool and very well adopted, apparently, because of stars. But the problem is that you can configure a lot in this stack through the environmental variables. And this, as I try to convince you, is a little bit, it's a violation of the open-close principle. And it's by the private vendor, and it follows their rules about how they want to keep it, because they are also hosting company and they are allowed to do it their own way, right? They want to do it so they can run the successful business. That's the point. And Amaze.io is another example. I will start from the same cons. So it's also it's very open source. I love Amaze.io and I love these guys, and but it's also some private hands, and it also is meant for their hosting platform. Of course, it can be used by others also, but it's meant by it's made so it's easy for them to run it. It's maybe, that's a question, that's why the question mark is there. Maybe it's a bit overcomplicated. It uses, it's just one huge repository where you can build things using the multi-stage builder path. Multi-stage builder. Just in favor of that, documentation is amazing. How to build your stack based on the components delivered by Amaze.io. It's open source, and they are very open about everything what's happening in their company, and it's also production ready, and they proved it by running a lot of sites on their stack. So it's definitely a place where it's worth to stop by and see the best practices, some of the best practices. But my question is, what should we do, we as a community? Is there a better way than just rely on some private vendors? And it's like, wow, what's going on here? Why there is a PHP code on the screen? And this is a static service container wrapper from PHP, or this example use of it. You see the Drupal service being taken from, or the date service is taken through the static service container wrapper, and then just reused somewhere in the object-oriented code. What's wrong about it? It's that it doesn't follow the dependency injection, right? It's just things loaded statically, and you cannot test it properly. Yeah, this is just wrong, right? But still, the internet is full of examples like that. And why is that? Because to make it simpler, right? You just copy this line, paste it in your code, and it works. And this is a shortcut. This is obvious. And this is obvious for all of us who are familiar with dependency injection. But I personally know some people who are not familiar with dependency injection. And they ask me, okay, but why shouldn't we do this way? Because the internet is full of that, so it must be correct. And I'm like, what can I say? It's not correct. It's just like copying everything, like putting the service, the data service or date service. It mostly depends on the way how you want to use it. Of course, if it's a controller, if it's another service, you will inject this dependency in different ways. So this is just a way to tell you that you should use this service and nothing else. But this is the way they see it. They see it, copy this and use it. So in my opinion, one of the things we can do better is to improve our documentation by not giving the false examples and the examples which does not follow the best practices, but we should follow the best practices instead. Then that's yet another example. This is copied from docker.com, and they are aware of doing it this way. They know it, and they say that, okay, be pragmatic, but also remember, or this is wrong because it uses supervisors. So the supervisors is a tool which lets you use or make keep different services up and running. Am I correct? I'm not sysop, but supervisor is meant to run several processes and manage them to be running all the time. But one of our rules was to not put multiple processes into the same container. So this directly violates it. And of course, we must be pragmatic about it, but we must also remember that giving this example to someone would just, open their heads and like, okay, so I can use supervisor, so I can put everything together into one thing, and it's gonna just fly. And it's not, because, well, I tried to say that during like last 10 or 15 slides that it's not the best way, because we can do better. We can separate everything, decouple our application into several services, and then just run them one by one, and then swap them if we need it. So the second of three, actually, things we can do is to enforce best practices on people by providing better documentation. And how can we do that? We can run it as a community effort. And I already started it. This is the thing I started at my presentation with. Drupal Docker, available on the website drupaldocker.org. This is documentation site for this project. Documentation which lacks a lot of these things I just mentioned. And it would be fantastic if we can do it together and if we can help people understand how Docker should run, how we can think about it as about the code and how we can deliver it in the production ready state. These are the goals behind this group of people, which does not consist of many people, unfortunately. But I hope that we can get better. Our goal is to provide the curated list of parent images with these best practices I just mentioned about in mind. We can make outstanding documentation about how to use it, how to customize it, how to do things better, and make it in very verbose way. So make everyone be on the same page, and have a single entry point for Drupal devs that are aiming for some modern Dockerized environment for the projects, who wants to think about their infrastructure as about code. And make it also stupid simple, so people without any knowledge can just go into the one page and, yeah, this is how I should do it. So copy this and paste it, and I can just go. And so it's owned by the community, so it's not owned by any private hands. It's owned by community. We don't aim to be, I don't know, another product. We aim to be just set of best practices, so we don't care about many things, about any business value behind it. We just want to make sure that people are doing things better and better, and they share this knowledge to others. And we can distribute it on the same license as Drupal is, because why not? If it's a code, and if it's shipped with the code, it should be, right? Because Drupal is on a virus license anyways. So the structure for example project is, there is a parent, which is not here. I am not sure if you can see it from the behind the text in each of the boxes. If not, I will read it. Like on the very top, up even above this, like everything here, is some is Alpine base image, and then you have _/PHP, so official PHP image, and then you have Drupal Docker /PHP, which is the image provided by this organization, by this initiative, and then on the right-hand side you have your company PHP. So the way how you like the Drupal Docker PHP only has the most important parts of the PHP customization that needs to be done in order for any Drupal project to run, and then any simple Drupal project to run. And then in your company PHP, you can have the things you think are valuable for this project, and you need it for your organization because your organization needed this way or another way or whatever. But to this level, there are no assumptions how you should run it. Only best practices in mind and nothing else. And then maybe on the per project basis, you want to also add some tweaks, how to customize this PHP image just for this project. And then on the left-hand side, or your left-hand side, your left-hand side, you have the dev version of these images. So Drupal Docker /PHP dev, which inherits from the Drupal Docker PHP, and then it's your company, and the dev or -dev means that there are some debugging tools like Xdebug. The verbosity of the errors is set to all, and then it's your company, the PHP dev, the same way how we did the right-hand side. So your company PHP dev and project PHP dev. You can do that because Docker allows you to inherit over and over and over. And the nice thing is that you share the same layers, the same parent images, so it doesn't take any space on your computer. And when there is something new, to the PHP image, the Drupal Docker PHP will update itself. If there is something new, by new I mean if it's well-known security vulnerability, for instance, and which has been just patched, everything rebuilds in order, like first the PHP rebuilds, then the Drupal Docker PHP rebuilds, and then every other layer of this stack. So if there is known security vulnerability to PHP, we will get it just out of the box. If there is one more requirement to the PHP, like one more PHP extensions we need for Drupal to run because Drupal added it, then we just add it in one place and no one else has to think about it anymore. That's the idea. And so that's a quote from you. I love the idea, and how can I help? That's what you are all thinking right now, right? Just help. drupaldocker.org. There's a GitHub organization. I didn't want to create it myself, so I just made the organization, so I never own it. Everyone owns it. And if you want to be a co-maintainer of this project, just approach to me, or it can be over the internet or in person, and we can make all of you the maintainers of this project. Hopefully, at least contributors. So, are there any questions to that? We are finishing. So, if not, oh, there's one.
Thanks. Yeah, so first of all, thank you for releasing the images and maintaining them, and for your talk. I think, you convinced me that Docker is code. And I want just to add a little bit about the Amazy images. So first of all, they are no longer bloated.
Spoiler alert, he's from Amazy.
Yeah, I'm from Amazy. Not IO, but labs, but yeah, they are no longer bloated. So you've got like separate images for CLI, engines, varnish, and stuff.
That has changed, of course.
Yeah, and the other difference between the would-be is that the would-be, they have like their hosting. And Amazy.io images run on Lagoon, which is an open source project, totally open source, so you can take it and start your own hosting. So this is a little bit different than that.
Did I say it's overbloated? What I meant is maybe overcomplicated, yes. Yeah, and in the way that it can sound over-engineered, because the Lagoon is a huge success story for Amazy, right? But it's so complex as an entry point.
Yeah, it is.
If you want to run it yourself, then it's not that easy. It sets up a lot of things like OpenShift and so on, right? It's just not easy. And my point was to keep it easy, keep it simple, stupid simple. So everyone understands what's happening, and there are no external tools, just native Docker stuff. That's just what I meant.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Ah, there are 2 questions. Oh, 4 questions. Whoa. We have to go to the party, you know.
So you said that environmental variables at runtime, that's a bad thing, but okay.
I also said that you must be very pragmatic about it. So if that's your requirement, of course you do that. It's just have this mindset that be careful about using it, right? That's only what I meant.
But Docker also allows for environmental variables at build time when you're building your Docker.
Yeah. Arcs.
Yeah,
Arcs instruction.
Exactly.
Yes.
I forgot about the name.
Yeah.
Do you think that should be avoided also, or?
It's very useful. It's very handy. I'm using it.
Okay.
I'm using it for instance, for setting the UID or group ID.
So you build the
user on my, like this is the bottom layer of everything. So I nest or I inherit through all these images, and then per project I set this Docker file just for my CLI service to make sure that the CLI service is running as the same user as my host user. So when I share the volume from my host to
very familiar with the problem.
Yeah.
So you build the images all the time. I mean, you have Docker files in your project, no? Instead of references to the repository.
I think most of it can be reshared across, like put into your company PHP layer, because as far as I'm concerned, you can just create some user, and then you can just swap the UID and GID of this user to anything else. There is a DevOps guy, he probably knows that, or SysOps guy who knows that much better than I do. And he has a question, so.
So actually, I love Unix, so we all love KISS and Unix, but coming to the hosting and the SIPs and also the DevOps side or the Ops Dev side, there are things that are complicated. And to give you a little brief history of containers are there for 20 years, just like
sure.
They just took traction in web development rather recently to having tools that make it a bit more easy, make it a bit more simplified, using like kind of bashix again in Docker instead of going like Ansible container and stuff like that. But the point of like actually using containers was actually to isolate stuff between each other on one host or one instance.
Yep.
And also the main driver behind containers is actually that you can put more density to systems. So you can actually deploy there more stuff.
Yep.
And there's actually the problem where I see stuff is not too overcomplicated, but the thing is there's a different view on that. When you think from developer perspective, you build an image, you put the image to somewhere, you put it to a host. When you see it from the ops side, you see, okay, we want to have now hosts, that can run thousands of like images, and then you start, oh shit, but those images in the demo example were meant to take over port 80 or at best port 443, and now we have the problem that the initial goal was to achieve more density, and now we run one container on one host, and other stuff gets complicated because we need to introduce routing and all that stuff. We need to introduce proxies, into kind of that, all those kinds of layer, and running containers with Docker or whatever solution. There are plenty of the solutions. The bigger companies implement their own. Actually, you need to deal with that kind of complexity. And when you think about Amazy and say it's in private hands, we always reference to Lagoon, but actually what is underneath is a project called OpenShift, which is from Red Hat, and where they actually invested a lot of development power into that over the last decade to make sure that you as a developer don't need to deal with stuff which you can't know really because you haven't spent your time all the life on like building those kind of infrastructures that run that stuff.
Yep.
So you put your images there, you don't need to deal with port issues, You don't need to deal that you run in, like, for example, like maybe 2 MySQL containers, and you need to isolate them network-wise because you don't want to have your one side being able to access the other side. And that kind of stuff, that is not easy to do.
Sure, but this
And that's what Amazy is actually using. So I need to say them also to defend them there a bit. That is not completely in private hand. That is an open source project they built on top with Lagoon, but the underneath infrastructure, they just go for the principle that don't reinvent the wheel and, you know, use open source project.
Yeah, and I try to feature that. That let's. This is one of the last slides I have, so it's easy to get there. It's open source. It's production ready. Because of this, everything like the Lagoon, which is based on the OpenShift, and I totally agree. But these are different kind of problems. These are problems with the running the containerized infrastructure, or your containerized project infrastructure. And this is yet another problem. This is the problem for sysops, more than coders. And from my point of view, it's just about building these images, not the runtime, to make it extendable and to think from inside of the application, right?
Yes,
not
but the thing, DevOps is about bringing the stuff from development to production. So we want to care about all the way.
Sure.
And with Docker, I see mostly that we care about the one part, building that, packaging that, delivering that, using that one. But we also need to think about the other side. In the end, we want to ship that stuff and we want to run that stuff. And maybe we need to tweak some PHP stuff in it for having it at runtime really good. And that's where like infrastructure like Amazy provides, you know, or like OpenShift itself provides, or you can even spend time on doing that. That's actually part of the whole workflow. And that's what people, and especially developers, should think out in the first place. Because from upside, we can just say, hey, it's just containers. We don't care about that. Hey, if stuff breaks, hey, you're responsible. That's easy for us, you know.
Yeah, but it was also meant to be like that, right? That was the idea. That's why it's called containers, because you can just, you know, take this like with a physical container, you can just take it and use it wherever you want, and you don't think as a boat which ships these containers. How did the containers? What's inside? That was the idea. That was the whole point. But of course, like the knowledge from people like you and from people like Amazy is absolutely necessary to make this initiative, this project vital, and to make sure that everything is according to the best practices. And I salute you, and I salute Amazy.io. There's last question, and we have to go.
I just need some precision about. You said that Docker for Drupal is not doesn't have the correct license. It's not.
It's on MIT license.
So
it's compatible with GPL as far as I'm concerned.
I think
right?
it's pretty similar. I don't know. Yeah, whatever. And if it, you said the goal is not going to production, is it, or is it not at the end?
What do you mean?
All this container building. You said I don't want to speak about production.
Yeah,
but the goal is at the end to go
sure.
to production. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
And to respond to the sorry to you in front of me. From a developer point of view, container is a good thing because on the dev machine you have more services like the production ones. So you've got Varnish. You could have Varnish even on Windows. You can have Redis. You can have a lot of things, and got a more complexity on your dev machine instead of mockup or no Varnish or nothing. So it's also a good thing to have more services on the dev machine. After all the production is okay. It's never. Sorry? Yeah, better.
Well, your development environment should copy the production environment as close as possible, right? Yeah. That's the whole point of containers and everything. Yeah, the problem is that we cannot do it as a developers, and I'm talking from the developer perspective. We cannot do it exactly the same way, because we need our dev tools, we need our Xdebug. Yeah. And of course, when we don't need it, we can just swap it with another image which doesn't have Xdebug enabled. And if we don't need Xdebug, but we need Blackfire or Blackfire or something like that, we can also use it. But at the end, we want to test our, and we will use it for development. But at the end, when it goes through the CI, when it goes through the CD, it's going to be a bit different. What I'm trying to say is just like keeping in mind that what Docker was for is to bring, or all the virtualization is for, is to bring the production environment as close to you as it's possible, to you as a developer, because like one of the first statements I did is that your application heavily depends on the infrastructure, and it runs in this environment and not other environment, and you must test it in this environment and not another environment. But it is again, you must be pragmatic about it, because you as a developer working on a project must have these tools you use to be productive, to have better overview of what's going on in the application. So yeah, that's what's also the huge selling point of Docker, in my opinion, is that you can just take this PHP FPM service and replace it with the one with Xdebug enabled. And when you don't need it, then bring back the original one, the one which is consistent with the production. But good thing is that you have option. You can, change them, interchange them. And that's all, in my opinion. So, yeah, thank you a lot.